I'm Laverne, 62 years old, and I never thought my own daughter would tell me to pay rent or get out of the house I owned for 30 years. After my divorce, I welcomed Audrey and her husband Derek when they fell on hard times. What started as temporary help turned into them taking over my home completely. The day she screamed those words at me changed everything. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and stick around to see what happens when a parent's generosity is pushed beyond its limits. Life has a way of testing the bonds between parents and children. As a real estate agent in Boston for over 30 years, I understood the value of property better than most. What I failed to understand was how my own flesh and blood could see me as nothing more than an inconvenience in what she began to consider her home. My story really begins 15 years ago, when my husband left me for a woman half his age. The betrayal stung, but I had Audrey to think about. She was 20 at the time, halfway through college. Despite the emotional devastation, I pulled myself together and worked twice as hard to maintain our family home in a beautiful suburb of Boston and ensure Audrey could finish her education without student loans. I remember the day she graduated from Boston University with her marketing degree. Standing there in her cap and gown, she looked so much like the little girl I had raised, but with a confidence that made my heart swell with pride. All those late nights, working extra listings, all those weekends spent showing houses instead of relaxing, they all felt worth it in that moment. When Audrey met Derek at a company event 3 years later, I was happy for her. He was charming, well-dressed, and worked as a financial analyst for an investment firm. Their wedding was everything Audrey had dreamed of since she was a little girl. I spent a small fortune on it, wanting her day to be perfect. They moved to Chicago shortly after both, with promising careers and what seemed like a bright future ahead. For several years, things appeared to be going well. Audrey would call weekly, sharing stories about her promotions and their life in the city. They bought expensive furniture, took luxurious vacations, and seemed to be living the American dream. I visited them once a year, staying in their beautiful downtown apartment, with its breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. The first sign of trouble came 3 years ago. Audrey called me in tears, explaining that her company had undergone massive downsizing and she had lost her job. I reassured her that she was talented and would find something new quickly. She had always been resilient, just like me. What I didn't know then was that Derek had developed a gambling problem. Audrey kept this from me, probably out of embarrassment or perhaps loyalty to her husband. I only learned the full extent of it much later. According to what she eventually admitted, he had started with sports betting, then moved to online poker, and finally to weekend trips to casinos in neighboring states. Their financial situation deteriorated rapidly. Audrey struggled to find a comparable position in her field. Derek continued to work, but was secretly draining their savings to feed his addiction. They maxed out credit cards, took out personal loans, and eventually couldn't keep up with their apartment rent. The call came on a rainy Tuesday evening. I had just returned from showing a property when my phone rang. Audrey was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. "Mom, we're going to be evicted," she finally managed to say. "We can't pay our rent. We have nowhere to go." Without hesitation, I offered what any mother would. "Come home, sweetheart. You can stay with me until you get back on your feet." 2 weeks later, they arrived with 4 suitcases and a truck full of belongings. Seeing the stress etched on Audrey's face, I made a spontaneous decision. "Why don't you two take the main house? I'll move into the guest house in the back garden. You'll have more space that way." The guest house was originally built as a mother-in-law suite when I thought my own mother might come live with us in her final years. Though she ultimately chose to stay in her retirement community, the space had become my peaceful retreat after the divorce. It had its own small kitchen-bathroom bedroom and sitting area. It would be cozy, but manageable. Audrey hugged me tightly that day. "Mom, you're literally saving our lives. We'll be back on our feet in no time, I promise. Derek shook my hand firmly. This is just temporary, Laverne. We really appreciate your help. I believed them. I wanted to believe them. After all, they were family. The first few months went relatively well. Audrey and Derek seemed grateful for the roof over their heads. They kept the main house clean, and Audrey often invited me over for dinner. We would sit around the dining table that had been in our family for generations, sharing meals and conversations like we used to before she moved away. Derek would ask about my day selling houses, and Audrey would share updates about her job search. They helped with yard work and even repainted the kitchen as a thank you gesture. During those early days, I felt good about my decision. This was what family was for, supporting each other during difficult times. About 3 months in, Audrey found a new marketing position at a smaller company. The salary was considerably lower than her previous job, but it was steady income. She was initially upbeat about the opportunity, telling me it could lead to better things once she proved herself. It's not what I was making before, but it's something, she said during one of our dinner conversations. Once Derek finds something too, we can start saving for our own place again. Derek, meanwhile, supposedly spent his days job hunting. He would leave the house in the morning dressed in business attire, resume in hand. At least that was the impression he gave. I later discovered he was often going to the local library to use their computers for gambling sites, or driving to a friend's house to watch sports and place bets. About 5 months into their stay, I began noticing subtle changes in Audrey's attitude toward me. The warm hugs became less frequent. Dinner invitations dwindled from several times a week to once every couple of weeks. When I would stop by the main house to pick up mail or check on things, Audrey sometimes seemed impatient, as if my presence was an interruption. "Mom, we were just about to go out," she would say, or, "Can we talk later? I'm in the middle of something important." I also noticed new purchases appearing in the house. A large flat-screen television replaced the modest one in the living room. New designer furniture pieces began to appear. Audrey started wearing expensive clothes again, carrying bags from high-end stores into the house when she thought I wasn't watching. When I casually asked about their financial recovery, the answers became increasingly vague. "We're still struggling, Mom," Audrey would say with a sigh. "Derek's job search isn't going well. The economy is terrible right now." Yet somehow they had money for luxury items. I pushed aside my concerns, telling myself perhaps they were using store credit, or that Audrey's new job was paying better than she had let on. At the 6-month mark, I felt it was reasonable to have a conversation about their plans. We sat in the kitchen one Sunday afternoon while Derek was supposedly at a job interview. "Sweetheart, it's been half a year since you moved in. I'm wondering what your timeline looks like for finding your own place." Audrey's face immediately crumpled. She burst into tears, something that had always broken my heart since she was a little girl. "I can't believe you're pushing us out when you know how hard things have been," she sobbed. "We're still recovering financially. My job barely covers our credit card minimums. Do you want us to be homeless?" I backpedaled immediately, feeling like the worst mother in the world. "Of course not, honey. Take all the time you need. I just wanted to understand where things stand." She wiped her tears and hugged me. "Thank you for understanding. We're trying our best, I promise." That night, as I sat alone in the guest house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been manipulated. The tears had seemed to turn on and off too quickly. Yet I pushed the thought away, feeling guilty for even considering that my daughter would play on my emotions. As months passed, my concerns about their financial management grew. They always had an excuse for why they couldn't contribute to household expenses. The property taxes increased. The water heater needed replacing. The grocery bills climbed as they entertained friends I had never met. I covered all of it without complaint, dipping into my retirement savings more than I should have. Meanwhile, Derek became increasingly disrespectful. He would leave messes in the shared spaces, park his car, blocking my access to the driveway, and sometimes respond with just a grunt when I greeted him. Whenever I tried to discuss the situation with Audrey, she would become defensive or change the subject. On several occasions, she reminded me of all the times I had missed her school events due to work, as if my current generosity was merely repayment for past parental failures. Before I knew it, a full year had passed since they had moved in. The temporary arrangement had quietly transformed into something permanent, without any acknowledgement or discussion. No mention was made of the anniversary. No thank you for the continued support. No update on plans for independence. I began to feel like a guest in my own property. The second year brought a dramatic shift in the household dynamics. What had started as me generously offering my home had evolved into Audrey and Derek essentially taking ownership of the space both physically and psychologically. The first major change came when Audrey announced they were rearranging the living room. I returned from showing houses one day to find that my antique bookcase, filled with photo albums and mementos from Audrey's childhood, had been moved to the garage. In its place stood an enormous gaming setup with multiple screens and flashing lights. "Derek needs a proper entertainment center," Audrey explained when I expressed surprise. "You weren't using this space anyway since you're in the guest house." I nodded and said nothing, though it stung to see family heirlooms discarded so casually. Over the following weeks, more of my belongings were relocated to the garage or attic to make room for their things. My grandmother's china cabinet, the reading chair where I had rocked Audrey to sleep as a baby, even the family photos on the walls were gradually replaced with modern art pieces and Derek's sports memorabilia. Their friends' people I had never been introduced to began coming over for parties that lasted well into the night. The noise would keep me awake in the guest house, and I would find empty beer bottles and cigarette butts scattered across the garden the next morning. When I gently suggested they might inform me before hosting large gatherings, Audrey rolled her eyes. "Mom, we're not teenagers. We don't need permission to have friends over." I tried to explain that it wasn't about permission, but courtesy. She walked away mid-conversation. Audrey's demands grew more extravagant. She complained about the outdated kitchen appliances, though they were only 5 years old. The bathroom fixtures were embarrassing when her friends came over. The carpet in the master bedroom gave her allergies. Each complaint came with an expectation that I would finance the upgrades. Meanwhile, I began to suspect that Derek wasn't actually job hunting. He was always home when I returned from work, usually playing video games or watching sports. Once I overheard him on the phone talking about a bet he had placed on a basketball game. When I asked Audrey about his job search, she became immediately defensive. "He applies for dozens of positions every week. It's not his fault the economy is discriminating against men in finance right now." The statement made little sense, especially as I had several clients in the financial sector who had mentioned their companies were actively hiring. I began to research on my own, checking job listings in our area. There were plenty of positions that matched Derek's qualifications. One afternoon while they were out, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked their mail that had been delivered to the house. Among the envelopes was a credit card statement addressed to Derek. My eyes widened as I saw the balance, $27,000. The recent charges included airline tickets, designer clothing stores, and several large withdrawals at casino ATMs. I carefully returned the statement to its envelope, my hands shaking. They weren't struggling financially because of unemployment or low wages. They were struggling because they were living far beyond their means, apparently financing a luxury lifestyle on credit while taking advantage of my free housing. The next day, I attempted to have a serious conversation about financial contributions. We sat at the kitchen table and I tried to keep my tone casual. "Since you've been here longer than expected, I think it would be fair if you contributed something toward the household expenses. Even a small amount would help with the rising utility bills." Audrey's expression darkened. "We can't afford that right now, Mom. You know that." "But Audrey, I noticed some expensive purchases recently. If you can afford those things, perhaps you could manage a small contribution to the household." Her eyes narrowed. "Have you been spying on us? Going through our things?" "No, I just observed." "I can't believe you. After everything I went through as a child with you always working, never being there for my recitals or school plays. Now you want to charge me money when we're struggling. Is that how little you care about your own daughter?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I had worked those long hours to provide for her after her father left, to put her through college without debt, to give her the wedding of her dreams. But pointing this out would only escalate the argument. "That's not what I meant, Audrey. I'm just trying to establish some boundaries." "Boundaries," she scoffed. "This is family. We're supposed to support each other unconditionally." I retreated from the conversation feeling both hurt and increasingly resentful. That night I called my friend Martha, the only person I had confided in about the situation. "Laverne, this isn't healthy," she said firmly. "They're taking advantage of you. You need to set clear boundaries before this affects your health." Her words were prophetic. Over the next few months, the stress began to take a physical toll. I lost weight. My sleep became fragmented. I developed frequent headaches. My real estate colleagues commented that I seemed distracted and tired during meetings. Yet still, I avoided confrontation, hoping somehow the situation would improve on its own. I kept telling myself that things would change, that Audrey would remember the values I had raised her with, that Derek would finally find employment. I was wrong on all counts. My 62nd birthday marked the beginning of the end. I had planned a small dinner with a few close friends at my favorite restaurant. Nothing extravagant, just an evening of good food and conversation to celebrate another year of life. The morning of my birthday, I received a text from Audrey. "Need to cancel your dinner reservation. Having surprise party for Derek's promotion tonight. Using the house. Sorry." No birthday wishes, no offer to reschedule. Just a command to alter my plans, because Derek apparently had something to celebrate. I later discovered there was no promotion. He hadn't even secured a job. The surprise party was simply an excuse to gather their friends for drinks. I sat alone in the guest house that evening, listening to the music and laughter from the main house. Not one person knocked on my door to include me. Through the window, I could see Audrey dancing drink in hand without a care in the world. In that moment, I felt more alone than I had even after my divorce. The final breaking point came the following weekend. I had always loved gardening. The rose bushes along the garden path had been my pride and joy for 20 years. I had nurtured them through harsh winters and summer droughts. Each bloom felt like a personal achievement. I returned from a morning showing houses to find Derek uprooting my entire rose garden. A pile of my beloved plants lay wilting in the sun, their roots exposed. In their place was a partially constructed wooden platform. "What are you doing?" I asked, unable to keep the shock from my voice. Derek barely looked up. "Building my outdoor man cave, going to have a hot tub bar set up, the works." "But those roses, I've had them for decades." He shrugged. "Audrey said it would be fine. They were just taking up space anyway." I found Audrey in the kitchen. "How could you tell Derek to destroy my garden without even asking me?" She looked annoyed at the interruption. "Mom, it's just some flowers. The yard needed updating. Besides, this is our home now too, and we should be able to make improvements." "Our home," I repeated. "Audrey, I welcomed you here temporarily when you needed help. I never gave you permission to take over or make permanent changes." She put down the glass she was holding and crossed her arms. "This is our house now. We've been living here for almost 2 years. We've made it our own. You're just being selfish and controlling like you've always been." I was stunned by her words. "Selfish, I moved into the guest house to give you space. I've paid every bill. I've watched you replace my belongings with yours without complaint. How exactly am I being selfish?" "You just don't want us to be happy," she shouted. "You want to control everything because you're lonely and bitter about Dad leaving you." Her words cut deep, but what happened next was even more disturbing. That evening I overheard Audrey and Derek talking on the patio, not realizing I was in the garden shed nearby. "We need to figure out what to do about your mom," Derek said. "She's becoming a problem." "I know," Audrey replied. "Maybe we should look into those senior communities. Tell her it would be better for her there." "Do they take people her age? She's not that old." "We could say she needs the care. She has been looking tired lately." I stood frozen, gardening shears in hand, as my own daughter and her husband casually discussed getting rid of me from my own property. The property I had worked decades to pay for. The property where I had raised her. That night, I lay awake until dawn, tears silently streaming down my face. How had we reached this point? Where had I gone wrong as a mother? Had I spoiled her, failed to teach her empathy and gratitude? Or was this simply who she had chosen to become as an adult? By morning, I knew I needed professional advice. I called my financial advisor, Thomas, and scheduled an urgent meeting. "Laverne, I've been concerned about the withdrawals from your retirement account," he said when I sat in his office later that day. "At this rate, your financial security is at serious risk." I explained the situation, embarrassed to admit how I had allowed things to deteriorate. "You have options," he assured me. "This is your property. You have the legal right to ask them to leave." "But she's my daughter," I said weakly. "Who is taking advantage of your generosity. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do as a parent is to stop enabling destructive behavior." His words resonated with me. Martha had been saying something similar for months. After careful consideration, I decided to request a modest rent contribution of $800 monthly, well below market rate for the 3-bedroom house they were occupying. I approached them that evening with what I thought was a reasonable proposal. They were sitting in the living room, Audrey scrolling through her phone while Derek played a video game. "I need to talk to you both about something important," I began. Derek paused his game with an annoyed sigh. Audrey didn't look up from her phone. "I've been thinking about our living arrangement," I continued. "Since it seems to have become more permanent than we initially discussed, I think it would be fair if you contributed a small amount toward the household expenses. I was thinking $800 a month starting next month." The silence that followed was deafening. Audrey slowly put down her phone and stared at me as if I had suggested something outrageous. "You want us to pay you rent?" she asked incredulously. "Not rent exactly, just a contribution toward the expenses. The property taxes alone are—" "I can't believe you would do this to your own daughter." Audrey jumped to her feet. "After everything we've been through." "Audrey, please try to understand. I'm not asking for market rate. Just a small— We're family," she shouted, her face reddening. "You don't charge family for helping them." "It's been almost 2 years," I said quietly. "This was meant to be temporary. I've depleted a significant portion of my retirement savings supporting this household." "So, this is about money. Your own comfort is more important than making sure your daughter has a roof over her head." Derek finally spoke up, his tone menacing. "You know, Laverne, lots of people would be thrilled to have their kids live with them. Maybe you're just a bad mother." His words stung, but what came next was worse. Audrey stepped toward me, pointing her finger in my face. "You know what? If you want money so badly, here's what's going to happen. Either pay us rent for staying in our guest house, or get out. This is our home now." "Pay rent," I repeated in disbelief. "Audrey, I own this house. My name is on the deed." "Not anymore. We've been here long enough that we have rights too. Pay your rent or get out." Derek stood up, moving to stand beside Audrey in a physically intimidating posture. "You heard her. $800 a month if you want to stay in that guest house. Otherwise, find somewhere else to live." I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign of the loving child I had raised. There was none, just cold entitlement and anger. Without another word, I turned and walked out, tears blinding me as I made my way to the guest house. Within an hour, I had packed an overnight bag and called a hotel. I couldn't stay there another night, not after what had just happened. My heart was shattered into pieces too small to count. That first night at the hotel, I cried until I had no tears left. The pain of betrayal by my own daughter cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced, including my divorce. Through the darkness of my emotions, however, a strange clarity began to emerge. I had spent nearly 2 years accommodating increasingly unreasonable behavior. I had sacrificed my comfort, my belongings, my garden, and a significant portion of my retirement savings. And for what? To be told to pay rent or leave my own property, to be treated as an unwelcome intruder in the home I had worked all my adult life to maintain. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney recommended by a colleague. James Harrington had specialized in property disputes for 30 years and agreed to see me immediately when I explained the urgency of my situation. "Ms. Wilson, legally speaking, your position is quite strong," he assured me after listening to my story. "Your name is on the deed. You have all the rights here." "What are my options?" I asked. "You could file for formal eviction. Given they have no lease and no legal claim to the property, it would eventually be successful. However, eviction proceedings can be lengthy and emotionally draining." I nodded, already feeling exhausted at the thought of a protracted legal battle with my own daughter. "There is another option," he continued, watching me carefully. "You could sell the property. Sell my home. Property values in your neighborhood have increased substantially over the past 5 years. It might provide you with financial security for your retirement while simultaneously resolving the current situation." The idea hit me like a thunderbolt. I had been so focused on reclaiming my house that I hadn't considered simply letting it go. The thought was both terrifying and oddly liberating. "How much could it sell for?" I asked quietly. "I'm not a realtor, but given the location and current market, I wouldn't be surprised if it fetched 7 figures. I thanked James for his time and left his office with a new sense of purpose. Before returning to the hotel, I made a call to Samantha Green, a former colleague, and one of the top-selling agents in the area. "Laverne, so good to hear from you. How can I help?" "I'm considering selling my house." I said the words feeling strange in my mouth. "Could we meet discreetly to discuss it?" Samantha agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon. When I explained the situation, leaving out some of the more painful details, she was professional and compassionate. "The market is extremely hot right now, especially in your neighborhood. If you're seriously considering selling, I could have potential buyers ready to view the property within days." "I don't want traditional viewings," I explained. "The current occupants, it's complicated." She nodded understandingly. "I have a developer client who's been looking for properties in that exact area. They often make cash offers sight unseen based on comparable sales. Would you be open to that?" The idea of a quick, clean transaction appealed to me immensely. Yes, I would consider that. Things moved with surprising speed after that meeting. By the following day, Samantha had secured a cash offer of $840,000 from the developer contingent only on a basic inspection. The figure made my head spin. I had purchased the house for $190,000 28 years ago. The decision weighed heavily on me. This wasn't just a house. It was the home where I had raised Audrey, where I had built a life. Every corner held memories. Yet those same corners now held the pain of recent betrayal. Perhaps letting go was the healthiest choice for everyone. After a sleepless night considering my options, I accepted the offer. The developer was eager to close quickly and agreed to a 30-day occupancy clause that would give the current residents, my daughter and her husband, 30 days to vacate after closing. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork signatures and quiet arrangements. I visited the house while Audrey and Derek were out using my key to retrieve my most precious possessions. Photo albums, jewelry, important documents, and a few irreplaceable keepsakes. I arranged for a small storage unit for these items and began looking for an apartment to rent. I found a modest but comfortable one-bedroom unit in a peaceful complex about 20 minutes from my former neighborhood. It featured a small balcony where I could plant a container garden, a fresh start to replace my destroyed roses. Only Martha knew about the sale. "Are you sure about this, Laverne?" she asked when I told her. "No," I admitted, "but I'm sure I can't continue as things were. This feels like the only way to break free and protect what's left of my future." The sale closed remarkably quickly. 1 week after Audrey had screamed at me to pay rent or get out, I signed the final papers transferring ownership of my family home to Bradford Development Group. The proceeds were deposited into my account, and the formal occupancy notice was prepared for delivery. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for the loss of my home and the relationship with my daughter, guilt about the dramatic step I had taken, but also a surprising sense of relief and even empowerment. For the first time in years, I had taken decisive action to protect myself rather than sacrificing my well-being for others who didn't appreciate it. The official notices were delivered 3 days after closing. I deliberately made myself unavailable, turning off my phone and staying with Martha for the weekend. I knew the storm was coming, and I needed time to prepare myself emotionally for the inevitable confrontation. When I finally turned my phone back on Sunday evening, there were 27 missed calls and 43 text messages from Audrey. They ranged from confused to angry to desperate. "Mom, someone delivered papers saying the house has been sold. Call me now." "What is going on? There must be some mistake." "Are you behind this? Answer your phone." "This isn't funny anymore. These people say we have to move out in 30 days. "Mom, where are you? This is an emergency." The final messages showed the first signs of panic setting in. "Please, Mom, I'm scared. We don't have anywhere to go. Please call me." "I'm sorry for whatever I did. Please help us, please." I took a deep breath and prepared to face the consequences of my decision. When I finally answered Audrey's call, her voice was nearly unrecognizable, thick with tears and panic. "Mom, where have you been? Did you see what happened? Someone's claiming they bought our house. They gave us eviction papers." I kept my voice calm and steady. "Yes, Audrey, I'm aware of the situation." "You're aware? What does that mean?" "We need to fight this. It has to be a scam or something. Can you call your real estate lawyer friends? It's not a scam, Audrey. The house has been sold legally." There was a moment of silence as my words sank in. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice suddenly small. "After you told me to pay rent or get out of my own property, I evaluated my options. I decided to sell the house to secure my retirement." You sold our house without telling us. How could you do that?" "It was my house, Audrey, my name on the deed, my mortgage that I paid off through years of hard work, my decision to make." Her shock quickly turned to rage. "You had no right. We live here. You can't just sell the house from under us." "Actually, legally I could, and I did. You have 30 days to find new accommodations." "This is insane. Where are we supposed to go? We can't afford rent anywhere decent with such short notice." "I understand it's a difficult situation," I said, maintaining my composure. "Perhaps you could look into those senior communities you and Derek were discussing for me. I hear some of them accept younger residents too." Her sharp intake of breath told me she realized I had overheard their conversation about getting rid of me. "Mom, we were just venting. We didn't mean anything by that." "I think we need to meet in person to discuss this further," I said, not wanting to continue this conversation over the phone. "Tomorrow at the coffee shop on Maple Street, 2 o'clock. "Fine," she snapped. "Derek will want to be there too." "That's your choice." The next day I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, selecting a table in the corner for privacy. My hands trembled slightly as I waited, but I felt resolved in my decision. When Audrey walked in, I was surprised to see she was alone. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. "Derek's not coming?" I asked as she sat down. "He's meeting with someone about an emergency loan," she said flatly. "We're desperate thanks to you." I let the accusation pass without comment. "Would you like some coffee?" "I didn't come here for coffee," she hissed. "I came to understand how my own mother could betray me like this." I took a deep breath. "Audrey, I welcomed you into my home nearly 2 years ago because you needed help. It was meant to be temporary while you got back on your feet. Instead, you and Derek took over my space, pushed me into the guest house, destroyed my garden, and treated me with increasing disrespect." "That's not true. We were grateful. Were you? When was the last time you said thank you? When was the last time you considered my feelings before making changes to the house? When was the last time you contributed anything financially to the household?" She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "When I suggested a modest contribution toward expenses, you screamed at me to pay rent or get out. You claimed the house as your own. You forgot whose generosity was keeping a roof over your head." "We were under a lot of stress," she muttered. "So was I. Yet I still managed to treat you with basic respect." I reached into my purse and pulled out several folded papers. "I found these in the trash 3 months ago." I spread them on the table. Credit card statements, receipts from designer stores, printouts of vacation packages. "You went through our trash?" she gasped. "I was emptying it because you and Derek never did. These accidentally fell out. They show thousands of dollars spent on luxury items, while you claim to be too financially strapped to contribute to household expenses." Her face flushed. "That's different. Those were investments in our future. Gucci bags and weekend trips to Vegas are investments. You don't understand our lives. Derek needed to network with the right people to get back into finance." "Audrey," I said gently, "I think we both know that's not true. Derek has a gambling problem. You've been enabling it, and I've been enabling both of you." Her lower lip trembled. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of vulnerability behind the entitlement and anger. "What are we supposed to do now?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You have 30 days to find a new place. The average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in this area is approximately $1,500. With your income, that should be manageable if you budget carefully." "Derek and I," she hesitated, "we're having problems. The stress of this situation, he's blaming me for pushing you away. He says if I had handled things differently, we wouldn't be in this mess." I felt a twinge of sympathy despite everything. "He's partially right. Your approach did contribute to my decision, but his behavior was equally problematic." She wiped away a tear. "I don't know if our marriage is going to survive this. He's talking about moving back to Chicago alone." I reached across the table but stopped short of taking her hand. "I'm sorry to hear that. Truly." We sat in silence for a moment before Audrey spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't recognize myself anymore, Mom. When did I become this person? This entitled, ungrateful person. This isn't who you raised me to be." It was the first genuine moment of self-reflection I had seen from her in years. A small spark of hope ignited in my chest. People can change, Audrey, in both directions. You can choose who you want to be going forward. Even after everything I've done, the things I said to you, even then. She finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "I need help, Mom. Not financial help, but guidance, like when I was younger. I've made such a mess of everything." "The first step is taking responsibility for your choices," I said carefully. "No more blaming circumstances or other people." She nodded slowly. "I was horrible to you. unforgivably horrible. After everything you've done for me my whole life, I don't even know how to begin apologizing." For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a small crack in the wall I had built around my heart. "An apology is a start," I said, "but rebuilding trust will take time and consistent action." "I understand," she whispered. "Do you think, is there any way you would consider helping us find a place? Not paying for it," she added quickly. "Just using your real estate knowledge to guide us. I'm completely lost." It was a small request, but an important one. She was asking for my expertise, not my money. It was a step in the right direction. "Yes," I said finally. "I can help with that." As we left the coffee shop, Audrey paused. "Mom, thank you for meeting with me. I know you didn't have to." It was a small moment, but it felt like the first tiny seedling pushing through soil after a long, harsh winter. The proceeds from the house sale secured my retirement in ways I hadn't thought possible. After purchasing a modest condominium of my own and setting aside money for living expenses, I decided to donate $50,000 to a local charity supporting homeless families. Something about the experience with Audrey had awakened a desire to help those truly in need rather than those who simply felt entitled. For the first 3 months after the sale, Audrey and I maintained minimal contact. She and Derek had found a small apartment significantly less luxurious than what they had become accustomed to in my house. As Audrey had predicted during our coffee shop meeting, the stress of their sudden change in circumstances proved too much for their marriage. Derek moved back to Chicago, leaving Audrey to navigate her new reality alone. During those months of separation, I focused on healing. I joined a support group for parents struggling with adult children, where I found comfort in knowing I wasn't alone in my experiences. I started therapy sessions with Dr. Eleanor Robinson, who specialized in family dynamics. Through our weekly conversations, I began to untangle the complex emotions of guilt, anger, and grief that had become knotted inside me. "You're not responsible for Audrey's choices," Dr. Robinson reminded me during one particularly difficult session. "Loving your child doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior." I also reconnected with old friends and interests I had neglected. I joined a gardening club and started creating a beautiful container garden on my new condominium balcony. I volunteered at a literacy program for adults. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been overshadowed by the role of mother and provider. The first tentative steps toward reconciliation came in the form of an email from Audrey 4 months after she moved out. It was simple but profound. "Dear Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking about my behavior over the past 2 years. I want you to know that I understand now how selfish and entitled I became. There's no excuse for how I treated you in your own home. I'm working with a therapist to understand why I acted that way and to become a better person. I miss you. If you're ever willing to talk, I would be grateful for the opportunity. Love, Audrey." I read the message several times, feeling the sincerity in her words. After discussing it with Dr. Robinson, I replied with a suggestion to meet for lunch the following week. Our reunion was awkward at first, both of us uncertain how to navigate this new landscape. But as we talked, I saw genuine change in Audrey. She had found a better job with a marketing firm that valued her skills. She was living within her means for perhaps the first time in her adult life. Most importantly, she was taking responsibility for her actions without making excuses. "I hit rock bottom after Derek left," she admitted. "I had to take a hard look at who I had become and who I wanted to be. It wasn't pretty." "Growth rarely is," I replied. Over the following months, we rebuilt our relationship one careful step at a time. I maintained firm boundaries about financial support, making it clear that while I would always offer emotional support and guidance, my days of financial rescuing were over. Audrey respected those boundaries, never once asking for money despite occasional struggles. She began inviting me to dinner at her apartment, cooking simple but thoughtful meals that reflected her new budget-conscious lifestyle. We started a tradition of Sunday afternoon walks in the park, reminiscent of when she was a little girl, and we would collect autumn leaves or feed the ducks. 6 months after our initial reconciliation, Audrey invited me to dinner with special news to share. "I've been promoted at work," she announced proudly, "and I've been approved for a first-time homebuyer program. It's a small condo, nothing fancy, but it will be mine. I wanted you to be the first to know." "I'm so proud of you," I said, meaning it completely. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom." "Yes, you could have," I corrected gently. "You did this through your own hard work and better choices." She smiled a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe. But your example gave me something to strive for. Your strength in setting boundaries showed me what self-respect looks like. It was the wake-up call I needed." As we sat there sharing a modest meal in her small apartment, I realized that sometimes the greatest gift we can give those we love isn't endless accommodation or financial support. Sometimes it's the courage to say no to establish healthy boundaries and to allow them to experience the consequences of their actions. Our relationship will never be what it was before. Too much has happened for us to return to the past. But what we're building now feels more honest, more balanced, and ultimately more loving than what we had before. It's built on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. Just last week, Audrey and I met for coffee at the same shop where we had our confrontation after the house sale. As we talked about her upcoming condo purchase, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I never properly thanked you, Mom." "For what?" "For loving me enough to stop enabling me. For having the courage to make the hard choice that ultimately helped me find myself again." In that moment, I knew that while the house was gone, our relationship, the thing that truly mattered, had been saved. Sometimes you have to lose what you thought was important to preserve what truly is. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt in the moment but proved to be the right choice in the long run? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more of life's complicated lessons. Remember, sometimes true love means setting boundaries, even when it breaks your heart to do so. Thank you for listening to my journey.